Okay, so today we're going to do a deep dive into a really powerful and frankly dangerous tool you see in politics. We're talking about a specific type of language that's designed to change not just what you think, but how you think about other people. And really, it all boils down to this one big question. How can a few simple words be twisted to actually strip away someone's humanity in our own minds? We're going to break down the mechanics of it, look at why it's used, and show you exactly what to listen for. So what we're focusing on here is a linguistic tool that has one job: to knock down our moral barriers. It's a way of talking that's meant to make really aggressive policies or even violence seem, well, not just okay, but maybe even necessary. Now, before we go any further, it's super important we're all on the same page about what this is and what it isn't. This is a scientific look at a rhetorical tool. We are not comparing people or moments in history. We're just focused on how the language itself works. That's it.
Okay, so to really get the power of this language, we need to define two things: the technique itself and the psychological button it's designed to push.
First up, dehumanization. Now, you might think of it as just a really nasty insult, but it's much more methodical than that. It's a specific pattern of describing people as if they're something else. Animals, vermin, a virus. The research shows the goal is to systematically erase a group's humanity in the eyes of the audience.
And that's when it triggers this psychological process, a thing the psychologist Albert Bandura called moral disengagement. Basically, once you label a group as less than human or some kind of threat, it gives our brains a permission slip to switch off our own moral code. Empathy goes down, and it becomes a whole lot easier to support actions that would normally seem wrong.
Now, this isn't just some abstract theory, right? This is a technique with a long, documented history. And by looking at real-world examples, both from the past and today, we can see exactly how this kind of propaganda works. And to really understand the mechanics, the source material points to one of the most chillingly effective and well-documented examples: the systematic way this language was used in Nazi propaganda before and during World War II. The propaganda at the time didn't just demonize Jewish people. It fundamentally reclassified them. They were constantly described using these metaphors of vermin, parasites, or a sickness. You know, things you don't reason with, things you simply get rid of. And this is where it gets so insidious. Look at the logic here. These metaphors weren't random. If you call people pests, then getting rid of them doesn't feel like a crime. It feels like cleaning. If you call them a disease, then wiping them out can be framed as an act of self-defense. It just completely flips the moral script. But this rhetorical tool didn't just disappear into the history books. The source material points to documented modern examples. And again, the point isn't to compare events, but to see how the exact same linguistic trick is still being used. For instance, here's a documented statement describing immigrants as poisoning the blood of our country. You hear that? That's not just a negative phrase. It's a direct echo of that disease metaphor, framing people not as a policy issue, but as a biological threat. In another case, we see political opponents referred to as people who live like vermin. There it is again, the pest metaphor. It reframes political disagreement as an infestation that needs to be, well, cleaned out. And then you get the even more blunt examples, like calling certain migrants animals and then spelling it out, not people. I mean, that's not even a metaphor anymore. That's just saying the quiet part out loud. So when you hear these things, the natural reaction is just shock, right? Moral outrage. But to really understand it, we have to push past that and ask a different question. What is this language actually designed to do? What's its job? And this slide just lays it out so clearly. It erases individuality. You're no longer talking about people, but the group. It creates that moral distance we talked about, and it just dials down our natural empathy. All of this works together to make extreme policies, like taking away rights, seem not just possible, but logical and necessary. So if that's the problem, what's the solution? How do you fight back? Well, the research is pretty clear. It's not about trading insults. It's a very deliberate strategy, and it's called rehumanization. And it breaks down into these 4 key steps. 1, you have to name it. Don't just call it mean or offensive. Call it what it is: dehumanization. 2, you fight abstraction with specifics. Use individual stories, real data. 3, you bring it back to the rule of law and universal rights. And 4, and this is crucial, you have to step in early, before this kind of talk just becomes normal. And that's really the bottom line here. The most effective response isn't about winning an argument or slinging a better insult. The goal is to actively and deliberately rebuild the very humanity that this language is trying to tear down. So, this leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? Now that we can see the pattern and know how this rhetoric works, what's our role as individuals, as a society, in rejecting this language and making sure it never ever gets the chance to take root?